Welcome to our Miracles Tribe members and members of our Miracles Attraction community on Facebook. I'm Teresa McGallicher, and I'm joined today by my partner, Carly Hardy. And we have another fascinating guest for you today in our continuing series of people whose lives have been positively changed by their practice of A Course in Miracles. Our guest today is Jane Lee Logan, and she's coming to us from Michigan. Carly?
Thank you, Teresa. And what a treat to have you with us, Jane. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She, like me, is a recovering serious person. So I'm sure that she'll tell us a little bit more about that. But I'm happy that you're now in the business of making people laugh. From the time she was a very young child, she was certain that she had no idea how any of this works or what she was going to do with her life. While she was in graduate school, pursuing the professional student degree that I'm sure many of us pursued for a while, trying to figure out what we were going to be doing, she realized that she could paint almost anything. So she enjoyed a wonderful career as a professional fine artist, and she claims that she's internationally unknown. But we will let her tell you a little bit more about that. And then there came a period of time where she put all the paints away and was struggling and really thought she would never paint again, when a fairy godmother appeared and told her she would be doing what she's doing now, something that she loves. She told her about the creation of Sassy Pants, Miss Sassy Pants, and her pup. So, Jane, you can fill in the blanks for us and let us in on more of your story. Thanks again for being here.
So glad to be here. Oh boy, guys and gals, y'all. My story is the same as so many of us that found this path, that are on this path. And that's that we all generally start out experiencing a lot of pain. Because there's a Buddhist saying that basically says that nobody comes to the cushion because everything's great. You don't start seeking this stuff because everything in your life is going great. Part of the awakening process is that you start to awaken to the fact that we're actually in hell. And we were just so asleep that we weren't even aware that we were in hell. So we start to awaken to the fact that heaven is something other than what we've been experiencing, and that experience is usually hellish. So like many of us, that was my experience as well. But from a very young age, I had a lot of challenges from a very young age. My mother became very ill when I was very young, passed away when I was still quite young. I had to take care of my younger brothers. I came from a family of 6. My dad was a functioning alcoholic and was abusive and not supportive. He didn't really know how to parent, was left with 6 kids after my mother passed away. It was a whole mess, right? But I don't regret one bit of it, because every single little thing I eventually saw was purposeful and led me to a point in time where I saw everything differently. So that point, I was still in graduate school. I was still searching. I tried everything. I mean, I tried men, I tried money, I tried education, I tried social status. I mean, if there was something to try, I would put on my bullhorns and charge toward it with everything I had. Like, okay, this is it, because I was desperate. There was such a sense of void within me that if I saw any hope of something, I mean, those bullhorns went on and I just chased after it. But I started to see while I was in graduate school at this point that everything that I tried, it ended up the same. At some point, it ended up like sand in my hand, and it just seemed to disintegrate, and there was just no substance to it. So still knowing nothing really about spirituality or that there was this other option, I had the thought, maybe the best thing to do is not to do anything. Now, that is not an easy thing to do. I'll tell you, when you don't have any clue as to what you're doing. Now it's easier because I recognize that that can be helpful. But then I did not know that. It was one of the more challenging times. The sense of void was extreme. And now I didn't have this worldly goal that I was chasing after. So there was just this sense of futility that often we feel, right? So I didn't know that that was probably the best thing that I could have ever done. And that I was actually being guided, because I didn't know anything about that. But then one day I was working at the university. I was working for a couple of different people at the university. One of them was a dean of, I forget which college. Just feeling this emptiness, this void. I was reading a book about actually near-death experiences. And I was raised Catholic until my mom passed away when I was about 13. So I hadn't really picked it up, or it wasn't really so ingrained in my psyche, but there was still that sense of, I always pictured Jesus as, oh, ye of little faith, this mean dude that was like, you're just bad. Well, while I was reading this book, and I certainly don't know all the ins and outs of how this works or how someone has an awakening experience. I would never suggest that I know, but from my experience and my very limited perspective, the experience was that I was reading this book and she was talking about Jesus having a sense of humor. There was something about that suggestion to me that it was almost like create a crack in this facade of my beliefs in a way that just opened something in me. And that day, everything changed. It was what people refer to as the lifting of the veil, an awakening experience, mystical experience. I had some glimpses of this for the couple years prior, because I'd started getting into meditation, even though I didn't really know what I was doing or what it was about. I had no clue. And I would get these little glimpses of something, but I had no idea. And they were very brief. And I really didn't, what I had that day was very different. But looking back, I could see that that's what it was almost like when the TV's trying to come on in some space movie where it's like, but this day it went on. There was like full screen HD TV. And it wasn't just a temporary thing. I lived in that space for a really long time, all the time. Well, there were moments and brief periods where I wasn't seeing so clearly, but I saw everything differently. And there was even almost like a physical glow over everything, like at times. And I had a lot of even deeper mystical experiences following that. And so I was kind of in this state most of the time, but then at times it would go deeper. I'd have more profound experiences. And this went on for quite some time. Excuse me, a little pup has to get down. It was during this time that I'd always had an interest in art, but I was a little bit above average, but not great. If you saw the stuff that I painted before and after, you'd be like, that's not the same person. But after I had this experience, like the Course in Miracles talks about, that there are abilities that we have that can come out and they're for this purpose, and we really all have them, but it's so individualized that there are some individual abilities that can kind of blossom or be revealed as we go along. Well, that was what happened to me with this. I could suddenly paint just about anything. And I did not know how to paint. I was not trained. I didn't know, but everything was giving me that I needed in ways that were astounding, really, and miraculous. And if I didn't know how to do something, essentially I could just close my eyes and I would just almost become it. I could feel it. I could, like if I needed to paint a leaf, I just knew how to paint it viscerally. And it didn't happen overnight, but one thing led to another, and eventually it became my profession for many years. But what came to mind just now, because I really wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, is to tell you a story about one of the things that happened when this whole painting career, if you will, started to unfold. What happens sometimes, and this has happened actually a few times in the last, this started over about 30 years ago. So what happened at one point was that when it's almost like this awakening experience was so sudden and so dramatic, and my life was so out of accord with it that everything crumbled afterward. So now I was in a state of peace. I could hear the Holy Spirit speaking to me more clearly than a conversation most of the time. And there was this deep sense of joy and hope and everything you'd expect to experience when God's on the field and you can see it. But I literally did not have a dime, and I could not get a job for the life of me. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have a car. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from most of the time. I didn't know where I was going to be living most of the time. It was, that part of it was very challenging. Those were the parts where I would kind of sometimes go into terror. But in each moment, each day, everything I needed was always provided in ways that were miraculous all the time. I never skipped a meal, and I always had someplace to sleep. And if I needed to go somewhere, I always had a way. So it wasn't like I didn't have what I needed, but it wasn't the formula that I was used to, that I knew that I had this car and this place to live and blah, blah, blah. I had to cling to the bosom of the Holy Spirit like a baby for my worldly needs. And I had to stay very close to that all the time. So there were times that I would feel this sense of terror when I seemed to think I needed something, and I would look, well, how am I going to get this? How is this going to happen? And I would start freaking out. And I'd have to really dig deeply in those moments and really practice. It's kind of where the rubber hits the road. And I was already really practicing this, but in those moments, I really had to dig deep. And so many incredible things happened during this time. It was just astounding, and wouldn't trade it for a thing. But I just realized I didn't tell you how Course in Miracles came, because I didn't know anything about Course in Miracles still. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. I'm working at the university, to back up a little bit. And one of the, I had two bosses, and one of my bosses, who I was supposed to be assisting, but I was absolutely useless. I mean, she would tell you to this day, like, you were just ridiculous. Like, I'm not a good assistant. Like, she became my assistant. Anyway, so she knew I was having some of these experiences, and she came in one day and said, I went to the bookstore and I got all these books, and I got this one book. It's really weird. It's got numbers like a Bible, and it's got like thin Bible pages, and it's really thick. And she goes, I just don't know what to make of it. Thinking I was an expert, right? I'm like, oh, I bring it in, I'll take a look at it. Like, I knew what the heck I was talking about. So she brought it in, and this is pretty early on. And I opened this book and I started to read it, and all that I knew was, she's not getting this book back until I could scrounge up some money to buy my own. That's all that I knew. And for me, and there were a couple other things that came my way at the same time, and all of them have kept pace with me throughout the years. There's been like little satellite things that come in and drop things off, but the things that came to me in the beginning, and all of them have stayed the entire time. Sometimes I'm attracted to one thing more than another, and I just follow that. I don't hold on to anything. I say always hold on to everything like butterfly wings. Oh, I just happen to have a butterfly here too. I have props. I didn't mean to, but hold on to everything like butterfly wings, lightly and willing to let it go at a moment's notice, because we don't know, we don't know what we need. So, but these teachings, including the Course in Miracles, have kept pace with me the entire time. And for me, and again, it's so individualized. So my experience is not going to be somebody else's. It's like every one of us is in our awakening is like the snowflake or the fingerprint. It's going to be very, very individualized. We cannot compare ours to anybody else's. Wherever you're at today is perfect. It can't be anything else. You're right where you need to be. That's it. And if you start to acknowledge that and accept it and take it in, you will start to see how true that is. And I don't care what it looks like. It is perfect right here, right now, for everything you need for this day. And when you begin to really accept that and to really sink into it and then really begin to see it, holy tamale. I mean, there's just nothing better. It's like I'm doing the dishes. Oh my gosh, I'm right where I need to be. This is perfect. And you feel joy doing the dishes. I mean, it's the greatest thing. Or you're in something that seems to be a challenging time. And when you begin to see that, no, there aren't any mistakes in this. I am about my Father's business. There's no other possibility. This is the truth, and the truth is true, and there's nothing else is true. You start to see things transform and show you and sing to you. It's just such a trip. So the Course in Miracles, when I started to read it, for me, it wasn't just like reading a book to me. It was, and I believe this is true for everyone, whether we're aware of it or not, and it's there for all of us. The words would come alive off the page. The words sang to me. In fact, so many times I would be reading the book. Just prior to reading something in the book, I would have an experience or a realization or an awareness. And then the next page, I would read that thing. Or the next time I picked it up, I would read that same thing. Like, they stole my idea. This is plagiarism. I actually did have those thoughts a couple times. I would also have experiences where I would start to look through the book. I would open it up and I'm like, I was certain at one point that there were not words on the rest of the book, because it seemed like it was being written as I read it. And I literally flipped through it and go, wait, there are words. I mean, it was uncanny. So because things had been so bad my whole life, and it was like almost like living in a desert and finding water. And when you find that water, it's like all I wanted to know was, what is this and how do I have it all the time? The bullhorns that I had put on previously for these other goals that I had pursued were nothing compared to the rack that went on for this, because I felt like I finally found it, right? I realized this is what I'd been looking for my entire life. I just didn't know where to look for it. I just didn't realize that everything I had been searching for was in me all along. And in fact, one of the things that happened was, because I had a lot of hardships and heartache and, abuse and all that kind of thing, I felt a sense of release. And with the Course in Miracles, we talk about forgiveness for all these individuals that seemed to fail me or seemed to not be what I needed them to be. Because I saw that not only could they not be what I needed, they didn't need to be what I needed, because it was in me all along. And there was this deep sense of release of all these expectations and the things that I had hung on to about concerning people not being what I thought I needed them to be. And it was just one of the most glorious experiences. I don't know if you can feel that. God flash. Oh, God. One experience that I had that I actually don't share with many people, and I don't know why I'm sharing it now, but it was one of the more profound mystical experiences that I mean, there've been a lot of those, but, and you, there aren't words for them. Anyone that's ever had them, you know, you just, words don't capture them. The words are so small. I was standing in a field of wheat. Yes, it's true. And it was, I wasn't aware of the field anymore. And there was this overwhelming sense of this presence that is just so profound. And I cry a lot, but like cry, and because it's overwhelming, it's good, it's joyful. I mean, I have tissues everywhere. And I'm either laughing or crying, one of the two. And so I'm bawling in this field, feeling this presence, snot crying. And so the presence was so strong that I couldn't stand up. You know, it's kind of the biblical idea of being brought to your knees. I mean, my legs buckled underneath me. I couldn't hold myself up. I was on my knees. And it was almost like this kind of like an inner movie screen that came up. And it took me through my life. It seemed like very quickly, but it went through everything, you know, and I could see everything, all this hardship, all the pain, all the challenges. And what I saw, this kind of this film going on very quickly, but I was very clear about what was happening. And then I saw that every single thing that ever happened was good and purposeful. And it all had one purpose: to bring me to that point in the wheat field where I was seeing that none of it ever happened. I mean, that is what A Course in Miracles is taking us to. That everything we've ever believed or thought never happened. It has no power, has no, the thoughts we think there's no mind to think them, because there's only one mind. They have no, the images in the world that are the reflection of these thoughts have no source or cause, because God's the only cause. So the only possibility is to bear witness to the truth of our own being, the one mind God. And that's it. And that's what the miracle is. We're just bearing witness, still illusion, in a language we can understand, what reflects the truth of our being, our one being, shared being, only one, omnipresent being. There are definitely trials, though. I mean, I've experienced a lot of trials too. Dark nights of the soul, as people might refer to them, some very challenging times. But they always, it's kind of like I've seen, it's kind of like you're swimming above water, and you can, you know, how if you were swimming above water and then you dive underneath the water and you keep swimming and you pop up, like 20 feet ahead. Like you didn't see where that happened, but it's kind of like that. Like when you have these challenges, it seems like you go underwater, but you're actually moving faster almost, and you pop up so much farther ahead than when you were above water before. And that seems to be kind of the ebb and flow of awakening in my experience. It's like you go underwater, you come up, you go underwater, you come up. Oh, Princess Sassy Pants. I forgot about her. Actually, I don't know if how much longer I'm going to be doing her, because there's what has happened several times is I feel a great passion for something. I feel led to do something. And then it starts to feel heavy, I'm not as interested in it. I don't want to do it as much or whatever. And I've learned that that's kind of often I'm being moved to something else. And I've kind of learned to kind of just step back and go, okay, if we're being moved, that's fine. That's what's this all about. And I don't know if I'm being moved from her completely. Sometimes it just changes, or there's a different angle or something. But she's really interesting. So she happened after the fine arts degree that I had successfully for many years, where I painted murals and portraits and things like that, in mostly oil. And then that started to feel heavy. And I didn't know what, and it wasn't that I couldn't do it, and I had the business and whatever else, but it was like pulling teeth. I'm like, oh, I just like walking in mud. Like if I never do this again, wouldn't be soon enough. I just was done. And so that started to fall apart. And in Princess Sassy Pants, it took a little while. But I was just doodling. I thought I'd never wanted to paint or draw again. I was doodling and started doodling this little character. And one thing led to another. I started posting her on Facebook a little bit, and people just started following her like crazy. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of fun. And it made me laugh. And it was something that was light and something unlike anything. So prior to that, my approach to spirituality was much more serious, like much more like the language I use was much more serious and just so spiritual kind of language. And then for now, this happened in 2013. So for 8 years now, I've had this great practice of how to talk about spiritual principles using terms like tutus, tiaras, fairy dust, and what have you, and not taking it so serious. It's serious, but you don't have to take it seriously, and you don't have to take yourself so seriously. And that's just been a tremendous practice for me to just kind of, there's humor in this. It can be silly. It can be light. It can be joyful, obviously, and goofy, and just, it doesn't even have to be directly, like I don't always use like even words using fairy dust and tutus and tiaras to describe spiritual principles. I don't even do that all the time. Sometimes I'm just talking about cookies, but it's the consciousness that is creating it that communicates. It's not the words necessarily. People are still helped by this little character, even when I'm just talking about cookies, because of the source of where it's coming from. And it's not Jane. So that's what's communicating. And it's just so beautiful to watch that and to see that it doesn't have to be so, the words, when you begin to live it, it becomes your experience all the time. The words don't matter so much. The words that are used so much don't matter, because they really don't. They really don't. It's the consciousness or the awareness that you're in that speaks louder than any word you're ever going to use. And so Princess Sassy Pants has been such a great experience and practice for that for me. And also like just kind of getting over myself. You know what I mean? Like I think that when you had one of the challenges I think most of us go through, you know, the ego tries to take over the whole spiritual practice and tries to convince you, you know, that you're all puffed up and all that because you've had some experiences. You know, you see a lot of people go off the rails with that one. And you got to reel that back. You know, you got to see that it has nothing to do with you personally. You know, it doesn't have anything to, Jane's not special. This is just the truth. There's not another possibility. It's not because of anything I did or didn't do, or because I'm this, that, or the other thing, or not this, that, or the other thing. It's just the only thing that's possible. And I have nothing to do with it. And we are fabulous, glorious, and holy, and we don't have any say in the matter. It's not because we did anything to make it so, nor can we do anything to stop it. And that's just, you know, I don't know why Princess Sassy Pants helped me to see that so much, but it's one of the things I'm very grateful for with her, you know, that sense of like, I guess it's a deeper humility, you know, which is so important. It's so important. I don't know what's next. We'll see.
That's so lovely, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And would you please tell our audience where they can find your work?
She's mostly on Facebook. I stopped posting her on Instagram because it was too much. And there's a website and Facebook primarily. Website is Princess Sassy Pants and Company. And then the website is princesssassypants.com.
Excellent. And we'll post links to those when we post this interview in our Facebook group. Thank you so much.
Come visit, say hi.
We've really enjoyed meeting you and hearing all about your story.
It was great to be here, you guys. It was great.
Yes, what a treat.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.